What pisses me off is like some socials you have to have a period, other you can do underscore, other you can do hyphen. Like, damn it.
Can like live. I don't know, man, but
This is why I need a list and why you shouldn't update your Mac when you have an important interview coming up.
yeah, somebody has Killing Cupid, and I'm like,
Hey, Susias and Cucinos. I'm Gallo, the chivalrous chauvinist. Welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast. Susias are my favorite. Today I'm joined by a guest. I was on her show not too long ago with a licensed therapist, Nadia, and she also does tarot readings. Nadia, take it away. Could you tell us more about yourself?
yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. It's great to see you again. I'm a licensed therapist, and my background is primarily working in romantic relationships and really any kind of relationships. I started working in domestic violence and intimate partner violence, and I was really fascinated to see as my career progressed how people who had better relationships tended to have better quality of life. And that sort of set me on a journey of being really interested in understanding how do we connect with each other? Why are some people more successful romantically? Why do some people have this kind of relationship versus that kind of relationship? And there's just so much stuff out there. There's countless, dating apps and advice columns and coaching courses for how to attract the one, how to not do this, and how to not do that. So, a lot of what I've done in my career, and then also in my own podcast, my own projects, is about just really trying to cut to the straight truth without, without necessarily trying to push things one narrative or another narrative. Just what are the facts? How do we really connect to each other? So that's primarily been my interest. And with tarot, I felt like that was just another way to cut even deeper. So that's a little bit about me.
That is important. Having a healthy relationship makes you have a happier life in general, because if your home life is chaotic, you can't function, at least not to your potential, outside of your home. So that's another great idea to like push for having healthier relationships. Where was a catalyst that made you decide, hey, you know what? I want to help people have better relationships?
So the relationships was sort of secondary to my interest, and that was like sort of the once I was already in the world of mental health, the relationships was sort of the path that opened up before me. I became interested in psychology because I grew up in a really rough neighborhood, and I had family members and cousins and other people in my life who did not. And I was really interested to understand, why was it that some people had great outcomes in life and were very happy and had money and lived in a safe place, but then other people didn't. And keep in mind, I also grew up in the '90s, and that was the peak of the anti-drug campaign, and um, I just remember seeing all this stuff like "don't do drugs, don't do drugs," but then I saw so many people doing drugs in my neighborhood, and this was something that we had just been drilled into us so intensely that I was also wondering, like, why do some people do these things that are so bad for us? Like, there's got to be something else going on, and that was kind of what opened up my interest in psychology, and then relationships. When you grow up in that kind of environment and you're living in this kind of danger, that does change your perception of the world, and how we perceive the world changes how we relate to and connect to other people. I also grew up in a very conservative household. And so for me, I was also coming from a different place, I think, than my peers. And that made it a bit difficult sometimes to understand. And all of those things really just got me interested in wanting to know more. And the more I was interested in it, the more I started to learn about it, the more I realized how much of an impact this really had in our lives and just how important it is. And that just continues to be, I just keep seeing that over and over again the deeper I get into this work.
I kind of have the same background or ideas, is that you're seeing things going on in school with classmates and peers that the relationship wise isn't the same that you're the way you're being brought up at home. And I would imagine that you had some kind of variation of machismo with your life, is that you should be more feminine, I should be more masculine, I should be hyper masculine, you should be the docile work at home, stay at home wife would be your model, I would imagine. With that, I was wondering, how did that relate to defining who you are now? Or is it just something that you just try to completely avoid? What's your take on that, on like a traditional household?
Oh man, we're really gonna get to it. Gosh, I could talk about this for hours. Um, I I would say I kind of took both. I think at first I really rejected it because my family is from the Middle East, and so this is obviously quite different than living in the United States, and the religious community and everything else that comes with that is not. It's very incompatible, frankly, with a lot of what we consider to be Western values and Western lifestyle. So for me, it was very frustrating because I was like, "Hey, man, I didn't sign up for any of this stuff. I did not choose to be religious. I didn't sign up for any of this. You guys are the ones telling me I have to do this." And like, I was also seeing people who were completely doing the opposite, who are free to go on dates and hold hands and, do whatever they wanted. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, why do they get this luxury, but then I don't? And so when I first was getting to the age where I was able to, like start dating and like kind of have more agency, I guess you will, in this regard, I really went totally on the opposite direction and I completely and fully rejected it. But then I think as I got older, I started to realize that, there are still good things about it and there are things that I like about it and there are still things that I connect to. And I think, when we're talking about traditional gender roles, I guess you could say on one hand, it's like I do feel like I reject them because it wasn't my definition, but it was like once I was able to clear out some of that, then I was able to decide what does that really mean for me? Like, what do I like about being a woman? And I really didn't like being a woman, honestly. When I was a kid, I didn't like it because I associated being a woman with having to be subservient, with not having agency over your own body, about not having choice in your life, basically. And so I felt like I really, rejected that femininity and I wanted to be, as like tough and independent as I could. But then once I realized like, okay, I already have this grounding. I know what I want. I know who I am. Now I don't have to do that. Now I can embrace, what I can embrace whatever feels right to me. And some of that is maybe a little bit more traditional, but some of it's not.
And the reason I wanted to bring you on, especially for this type of conversation, was when I was on your episode, I saw you presenting as more feminine than a typical average American woman, where dresses, long hair, makeup, and not just that you look like a woman, that you look female, but that you kind of have more of a not 50s, but more of a traditional appearance as far as how you present yourself. And so with that, I was wondering, when did you start presenting as more feminine in your dating life?
It's an interesting question. I think, well, New York is such a weird place to tackle this question. I think for me, okay, let me back up a little bit. In Arab Muslim culture, a lot of women are not even allowed to show their hair. And so for me, being able to wear my hair how I want to and to show my figure and to wear makeup and to I like makeup, but it's not just because, it makes you look nice or whatever, but to me it's like art. I love street fashion 'cause it's like how do you decorate your body? And I think for me getting to a place where I'm allowed to do that, where I'm allowed to do that on my own time and how I want to. I don't even know if I would say it's so much about the desire to specifically, um, I wouldn't say it's necessarily in pursuit of femininity, but it's like this is who I am, and I do like being a woman, and I want to enhance the parts of myself that I like in a way that, if I had grown up if I had grown up in the Middle East, maybe I wouldn't have had that luxury. I certainly wouldn't have had that luxury, or it would have been a much bigger battle. And so think that, honestly, I would say it's really only been since I've been in my 30s where I'm more comfortable in my skin. And, going back to the idea of fashion and makeup as sort of art, we want to, they say like, it's going to sound so cheesy, excuse me. Like they say like the sculptor sees the sculpture inside of the stone. I think as I've gotten older and better connected to myself, I feel like I have that perception of myself of like I see a different beauty in myself that I want to enhance. Where I think as when I was younger, I didn't dress as feminine because I was not connected to that idea and I didn't see myself that way. So that wasn't in the cards so much. Does that answer your question?
What I was, I guess, leaning more towards or wondering more is, or do men define that or do you define that? Like the pursuit of the men that you want, are you presenting as feminine because you want a particular type of male? Or are you presenting feminine because that's you within yourself and your desire for yourself?
I would say it's somewhere in between. I mean, I really like being a woman. all of those things. I like softness, I like beauty, I like wearing my hair long. And I also, which is not to say that short hair is not feminine, but for me and my background, that's something that I particularly associate with femininity. And so I also do appreciate men who appreciate that, who can also see that and enjoy it. I don't know that this isn't, I don't think, like, if I dated a guy who was like, "Oh, I don't want you to wear makeup, like, I don't care if you dress up." Honestly, I don't know if I don't know that I would be into that. And I don't know if it's like, about gender roles specifically, but it's like, this is something that I appreciate and enjoy about myself, and I would want him to feel the same way.
And are you specifically looking for a mate that is similar to you, more traditional, more in between? What is it that you seek, especially now that you're more comfortable in your femininity?
I feel like my perspective on this, it's not even so much about like the gender roles specifically. And you think about like, because when I think about gender roles, it's like men should do this and women should do that. I feel like the way I think about it, it's like I like being a woman and I like things that are associated with femininity. And so I would like a partner who can appreciate the same things that I appreciate, but not necessarily because like this is how it should be or should not be. And that isn't to say that like I want a partner who has to be like, I'm a tough guy and, I bring home the bacon and I'm the man. I'm not really into that, but I also appreciate a man who says, "Hey, I'm a man, my body is stronger and I appreciate my strength and and I enjoy that and I appreciate that about myself." I guess you could say it's yeah, I don't wanna say, like, it's, like, transcending gender roles, but maybe that is what I'm saying? I don't know.
What I'm hearing yeah, what I'm hearing is you don't want old traditional gender roles, but you're okay with more modernized gender roles.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, but I also don't, because when I think about something being a role, it's like something that you have to do without thinking about it.
Mhm.
It's like something that's kind of, like, assigned to you or something that you fall into because, like, you're needed in that place, but that's not, like, what I'm looking for necessarily is not, that. I think it's something that is because this is just what I want,
Mhm.
not necessarily something that, um like, it's the role, I guess, is defined by me and my partner and how he connects to his masculinity and how I connect to my femininity, but it's based on our own interpretations.
Being first generation as well, I grew up with the whole machismo thing and the whole trying to coincide that with 80s and 90s rom-coms of like, okay, the nice guys and you get the girl in the end and, be in touch with your feelings and be more, you know, all these things that the American West push for males to be, less masculine and more, not more feminine, but more that 80s and 90s rom-com guy. And seeing how women react to how I am as the quote unquote chivalrous chauvinist, it's it's okay to be masculine as long as you're not overbearing and still considerate of them. And so that is kind of like the picture. It's not a defined role for me because for me, it's natural to be a gentleman, to walk on the traffic side of the road, to pull out chairs, to stand for her, to open doors for her, or not allow her to open doors. And even, car doors, like, hey, sit in the car. I'm going to go around and open it. And it's not a domineering part of me, but it's more of a safety thing that me being a male, being hyper aware of what's out there, that there could be someone in a bad neighborhood that wants to rob us or just catching us not paying attention. So I'm aware of security in that sense. So it's not just this person I was raised to be, but not because it's something that I feel like I'm forced to do. It's just something that feels natural or inherent to me.
We talked about this a bit on my podcast about, I think this is something that I think a lot of, I don't want to say young people are struggling with because we're also young people, but um, I think people who don't have as much experience uh, being alive, we'll call it that. I think that there's a so I'm going to call it from now on. I think that there's a lot of, I think that creates a lot of uncertainty, right? Is it's like, you were saying that a lot of the men that you work with have this idea of like, you should be this way or you should act that way, and trying to fit yourself and contort yourself into that box isn't working. And so I think that a lot of people do kind of want to reject gender roles and say like, no, I don't want to do anything like this. I want to be something completely different. And like, if that's what you want in your heart, like, it's not for me to tell anybody what to do or not to do. But if you're doing this in response to like a rejection of somebody else's ideal, well, is that really coming from you? Like, is that really what you want, or are you only acting off of what maybe you don't want?
I see it more as guys pretending to be something in hopes or in what they believe will help them get laid. It's not even something that they want to be, is because it's like a means to an end, and they have no idea what journey they should make or perform to be able to get to that end that they want. And that's the biggest trouble that I see with males, in that they don't know how to be because they're not comfortable in their own skin, and it's plainly obvious what their end goal is. Whereas if you treat it as, okay, it's not a big deal, I don't care about it, the human nature of wanting what you can't have, where the way women respond or react to that is like, oh, hey, he doesn't want me, why doesn't he want me? I'm this attractive woman, all these guys want me, why doesn't he? So then that changes or shifts the focus, and guys just don't understand it, don't believe that. They think that the whole rom-com thing, if he's nice and says all the right things and is there for her, years down the line she'll finally realize he's the one for her. And you can invest that amount of time, but that's not typically how, in my experience, how women react or prefer males to be or behave around them.
If you put in enough nice coins, sex will come out eventually.
Yeah, there's a whole subreddit on that, nice guys, and there's also nice girls or nice women. And women go a little crazier when in their response, or how they expect guys to respond to them, and the internet is crazy.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's the whole thing, but that comes. I think it all kind of comes back to like, oh, I men like women who are like this, men like, or women like men who have these things or do these things, and I think that all kind of comes into the role, or like trying to assume this image or this, what's what I'm looking for, like this persona or character, maybe all of those things of like, this is how you're supposed to be to like, get laid or get a relationship or something. I think we also talked about this last time, that there was a I was working with a guy once who he had been working with a pickup artist, and he had actually been quite successful in that. There was this girl, he thought that he would never have any chance with her, and she was really beautiful, and he liked her a lot, and he never thought he had a chance with her. But then after talking to this pickup artist, the guy was telling him what to say and how to act, and the girl was interested in him, and they were starting to date. And then he was like, "Okay, now I have her, and I don't know what to do." It's like, well, yeah, because like this is, and not to say that there's anything wrong with helping people to um helping to facilitate conversations and stuff like that, but there's definitely a line between like helping somebody maybe get over some of their fear of speaking and helping them to um helping kind of guide them through that, versus telling them like, okay, this is a persona, and like this is like the code to unlock sex or to unlock a relationship or something like that.
Yeah, I think pickup artistry really only helps unlock sex, but not relationships. And in the end, a lot of guys end up realizing, hey, what I really want is a relationship. But because they were without sex for so long, that they figure, oh, I'll just have all the sex I want and then end up with a woman. But they can't end up with a woman because, again, it's a persona. They're not who they really are. They don't know how to treat a woman. They don't know how to have a relationship. They just know how to trick women into having sex or convince them into having sex. And they realize it's not fulfilling. And then when they want to have that relationship, then that's kind of like where I come in, like, hey, you need to forget a lot of what you learned here, because you end up not respecting women and treating them as a person. You see that as an object or as a goal, not as a potential mate.
Well, yeah, I mean, also, Lord knows that sex and love are not the same thing. And so, I mean, these are completely different topics. And so, just because you've mastered one does not mean that you've mastered the other. And I think that is something that we can all attest to, that you can love somebody and they can be horrible at sex, and somebody can have a lot of sex and have no idea how to connect to somebody else intimately. That's a fact.
Yeah, no, we touched on that on your episode. The good looks does not equal good sex, and the hard lesson that was, at least for me, that was a hard lesson.
Yeah, we don't want to learn it. We want to keep trying, but eventually we have to accept it.
Yeah, I want this hot woman by my side. I don't care that, she's a dead fish or whatever it is. She looks good and all my friends are jealous. But
So let me ask you,
yes, go ahead.
for you, when you start a relationship with somebody, if she's not good at sex, to you, is that a red flag? Or do you think that that's something that you are like willing to work with?
So it depends. So so slacks for me is sexual compatibility, looks, attitude, and X factor, je ne sais quoi. And the order that I look at is looks. First, she has to be attractive for me to begin even having a conversation with her. And then once I had to get to know her, her attitude and how she treats me or responds to me, whether or not she makes my life easier, makes it harder, then um, I'll keep proceeding. And then eventually, ultimately, you're going to have sex and then see how that works. But in the conversation that I have with her, I would normally have to find out how experimental she is or how kinky she is, if she's into kink at all. And for me, as long as she's willing to learn or willing to try things, I can work with that. If she says, "Oh no, the back door is only for anniversaries, and if you treat me right for the month before the anniversary, and we have a great anniversary, then you can have the back door." Like, so yeah, no, not gonna work. But if she is, I'm not comfortable with the back door, blah 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 blah. I'm willing to try it. I'm willing to do this. That I can work with because if she's willing to be open to try things, even if she doesn't want to do anything in the back, then I know I can try other things. We can do shibari, we can do role playing. So for me, sexual compatibility is important, but as long as it's willing to try things versus unwilling, and that's like, all right, that's it. I can't work with that. I can't do anything because I'm more than willing to try things that she wants to do. Anything in the book other than me being penetrated or me being in a sub, I'm fine with it.
Fair enough. So it sounds like it's maybe like if it's a combination of values and compatibility rather
Yes.
than the quality of sex per se.
Yeah, because quality of sex can improve, especially as you get to know each other. You're not going to be as uninhibited day one as you will be 6 months down the line. But 6 months down the line, if I want to try something, or if I want oral, or if I want to give her oral, and she's like, "Oh no, that's gross or that's degrading," and then yeah, we should have saved our time 6 months ago and had the discussion. So that's again the whole importance of having that conversation about sex with your partner, especially nowadays. It's a lot easier, or I would imagine it is. At least it is for me. I don't know why people are so hung up on talking about sex or what they want from a partner.
Yeah, I don't really understand that. Like, you can literally, like, just type in your phone, like, the craziest shit, and it will come up, but, like, we can't talk about anal sex with with our boyfriends and girlfriends. I don't get it. But I don't know. Sometimes, I wonder, like, have I just been doing this work for so long? Have I been maybe this is just I don't know, maybe I'm just living in, like, a different reality. Do you ever feel that way sometimes? Like, doing Susi's are my favorite podcast and the work that you do in dating coaching, do you feel like your experience and is just you just live in a different dimension or something?
Even before I started the podcast, even before the whole relationship and dating stuff I was helping out with, it was just kind of like, I'd have a conversation with males or females at work, at random clubs, parties, whatever. And, say, yeah, well, a shibari or whatever random kink thing. And they're like, wait, well, what? Okay, rope play? Everybody, what's rope play? It's like, oh God, I'm, I really am a socio. Like, I know that I was an intercourse addict. I know I was a sex addict. I know I was into a lot of crazy things, but that's not outside the realm of, and this is like after 50 Shades of Shit came out. Like people should be aware of BDSM, but I can't even talk about CNC and like in mixed company because otherwise they're like, oh my God, you are a rapist. You're just like, okay, that's actually more common of a female fantasy than you would like to admit or even realize. It is crazy to live this life, I guess, and be like not judged, but more of like, oh my God, stay away from him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me as a woman, it's like not that I'm not down, it's just that, like, my entire life does not revolve around doing crazy sexual things. Like, my interest in Killing Cupid is actually, believe it or not, like, it was, an intellectual pursuit, and that happens to include all of these things, and I think that is sometimes hard to, like, separate that, like, separate the topic from, like, the, 'cause I don't know, I mean, I guess to me, I just see it as, like, this is just, like, a normal thing that people do because I hear it so often, and, um, I think that sometimes that can kind of, like, overtake your identity rather than it's, you know what I mean? Like people, like, see that about you first, rather than just saying, like, "This is something that you do, and this is actually a normal thing in the world." Because we're not talking about it, I think.
Or for me, it's funny because people see me, oh, like, oh, him. You want anything about sex? Go talk to him. He knows about, or he's heard about it, or he's done it. And the assumption that I've done it kind of like bothers me a little because it's like, okay, just because I know about things doesn't mean I do them. But a coworker made a joke is, oh yeah, so I'm sure you're aware of Game of Thrones. There was a line Tyrion Lannister said, "I drink and I know things." It's like, oh yeah, he fucks and he knows shit. And I'm like, oh god, now that's like my tagline. That's my name. Like, no, I don't need that to follow me around. But at the same time, it's like, okay, it is true compared to my peers. More than most people, I do know more about random things, but I don't like that being associated or made as part of my identity. And I was wondering with you, is there anything that you've come across like, oh shit, that's too crazy for me? Or I can't believe people do this. Have you ever come across anything like that?
Oh god, I'm gonna have to think about that. Oh, man. You mean, like, in terms of, like, a sexual act specifically?
Yeah, a sexual act or just a lifestyle or fetish.
I had a client once who was obsessed with, he had a rubber fetish, and he actually came to me because he was spending, like, 4 hours a day masturbating into rubber, and it was just to the point where his fetish was super out of control, and it was really difficult to talk about it, and to, because it's hard to talk about these things. Also, a lot of therapists don't understand it, and so for them to actually go into an office and sit in the room with a stranger and talk about it is understandably really difficult. um, but I was quite shocked, not that he had the fetish, but just, like, how far it had gone without, well, for one, like, how much is I'm certain this was a we didn't actually get to work together in the long term, but, certainly this was, impairing his life. You're spending 4 hours a day, and then also, penis skin is quite sensitive, so that is also, it could be dangerous and you can really hurt yourself. So I was actually quite shocked how long he had been doing this without being able to seek any help. Um, and in terms I think that was probably there's that, and then also I find people who get into polyamorous relationships who have done, like, 0 research, who have, like, not worked on their primary relationship, and now you wanna put other people into the mix. That I always find shocking,
Yeah.
and, the fact is, like, I mean, people monogamous relationships are difficult enough to maintain. Polyamory, that's a whole other ballgame, and I think that, I'm not really sure why this is, there's so many layers. This is such a complex topic, but when I hear people who are just, like, decide that they're just gonna do this, I've seen a lot of relationships really be ruined in a very negative way that, probably could have been mitigated, or, had a better outcome had proper preparation, um, been taken into account. Unfortunately, was not.
Yeah, yeah. Polyamory is almost like it's probably the second most common, or at least most more. I guess it's trending more now, but it seems like the second most common thing to try to fix a relationship after let's have a baby to fix it. Like, oh man, that's. I mean, at least you're not ruining another life. But with polyamory, it's just oh, let's dive into it. Like, wait a minute, no, just like with kink, you can't just jump in the deep. I mean, you can if you want, but you're likely to get hurt, not just physically but emotionally. There's all these other things that you need to take into account, and more often than not, it's one person that's more interested in it and dragging the other person along. They're following along because they think that that'll make the first partner want them more or appreciate them because they're willing to do this for them rather than having the conversation and finding what the root problem is. And that's just, I wish I'd gone to college or finished college so I could be a therapist because, you have to take all these licensures, but to get certified for anything, you have to have a bachelor's. Like, well, shit, I'm not going to go to college and spend 100 grand now for that. So, anyways. Oh, speaking of that, how do you feel about all these dating coaches just popping up on Instagram and social media and all this other craziness with or without any type of certifications? Like what's your take on coaches?
It's terrible. Honestly, it's terrible. I think, look, this is not to say that there are people who can help you, and I mean, I'm not this is not to say that these coaches haven't helped people. For sure, I mean, they wouldn't have a business, they wouldn't have a following if this wasn't doing something for somebody. But I used to actually work for a relationship coaching company that was fully remote, and I had to quit because what ends up happening, and this is something a lot of people don't realize, you know, like we started talking about, when it comes to relationships, everything that you have, and everything is connected, right? Our negative beliefs, our pathologies, everything is being manifested in our romantic relationships, the things that we tolerate, the people that we're attracted to. And it is absolutely imperative to be able to recognize those patterns and understand that when you're working with somebody. Because a lot of times what happens is you have somebody who, and this was actually what happened at the organization I was working at, well, the company, I can't call it an organization, the company that I was working for. What ended up happening was, you'd have people call in, they would have a remote session, and they were, because there's no formal licensure for coaches, what would happen is people would call in and say, uh, I got into a fight with my girlfriend, I tried to do this and I tried to do that, I went to her house, I gave her flowers and I tried to make everything better. And then I did all of these great gestures for her. And then she doesn't care about me. And, I don't know what to do. I just don't feel appreciated. And I was a supervisor. So I would go back and listen to their calls. And it's like, this guy sounds like a fucking narcissist. Like, we should not be giving him any kind of advice because what ends up happening, and this is not exclusive to people on the cluster B spectrum, cluster B being the erratic, dramatic, like narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder. And, if untreated, these disorders can really wreak a lot of havoc, not only in the life of the person who is suffering from this disorder, but then also the people around them. So, what happens is sometimes you'll have somebody, for example, who has some antisocial traits and they don't have empathy. And so they'll try everything they can to get their partner to come back to them. And then when it doesn't work out, then they'll seek outside help. And they are not able to understand what their partner needs. And that's the reason why their partner rightfully broke up with them because it wasn't working anymore. And that was what they needed to do to protect themselves. Well, then you have somebody else coming in and telling them, this is what you say and this is what you do. A person who does have empathy and understands what their partner is going through. And then sometimes that just ends up feeding that, just getting them back into the same trap again. And that makes it much more difficult for the victim because it's like, wow, like he told me these things, he or she told me these things I wanted to hear. And I feel like they really understood me for once. Like, how can I get that back? And then they can end up becoming more invested in this relationship that they were right to try to get away from. And maybe that's an extreme example, but I see that kind of stuff happen all the time. And the fact is that relationships are very messy and nuanced. And, there is no, you can't say like, oh, if she does this, then you need to break up with her. Because, like I was actually just I actually just interviewed somebody yesterday for Killing Cupid, and she is a organizational psychologist, and we were talking about different toxic work environments and why some people actually thrive in them. It's like because maybe this is has some bad qualities, but also has good qualities, and maybe this is what works for them. And so, if we're not able to really truly understand our own traits and understand how we're relating to other people, we can't really offer people too much in terms of real guidance on how to better understand our own relationships. And like once again, you can still give people advice, but I think that it's really really important to have that awareness of where that line is. And I think a lot of people get into dating coaching because they're like, oh, I know how to write good text messages, I know how to write a good dating profile. But without that knowledge, you can really run into a very bad place for yourself and your clients.
When you were describing initially what was going on with the relationship, that he broke the he messed up and he was bringing things. At first, it sounded like, oh, he's trying to be a nice guy, he's trying to fix things, and like, oh, he doesn't know her love language. But then you started saying that the client was I. Like, oh shit, that's no bueno. And coming from that's more of me as an intercourse addict, but also being an opportunist, being predacious, being the dark triad of having those traits of knowing how to manipulate people, knowing how to manipulate women, and realizing how bad that is. Then I can spot it. I can like, oh shit, red flag, red flag. Like, oh, okay, she's going into that, she's discussing that. But I would imagine that most people that are coaches or whatever it is that was at that company you were with, either don't have the training or don't have the experience of this is a bad situation. This guy needs help, not to get the girlfriend, but to realize the type of person he is and try to how manipulative he is being because he only cares about the relationship and how he appears to others, not about the person, the relationship that he's with. And so that's part of my regret of not having the training that I have, or that I should have had, to be able to be a coach. So that's why I don't try to advertise it. Oh yeah, I'm a dating coach, I'm a relationship coach, because I'm not great at, I'm decent at texting and whatever, but I'm better at more in-person interactions, because I can see and realize whether they're being manipulative or if they're just being, they don't know what they're trying to do or don't know how to get what they want, because it's, in their nature or lack of nature.
Yeah, I mean, the line is very blurry, and that's one of the things that makes it so difficult to work with these clients. And you really need to um it's just it's so important. I think there can be a lot of really bad stuff that can come out of that, and the problem is that this industry can be very lucrative because a narcissist sees, oh wow, like there's somebody who I can just text and will tell me what to say, and they can open all these doors for me. I mean, we had people spending $5,000 a week in there sometimes. Yeah, it was crazy. Um,
I'm totally undercharging. Wow. Okay. Oh, sorry. That's that's the opportunist of me. Sorry. I just go ahead.
yeah,
Apologize.
no, but I mean, it just shows you like there is, but it's like that's I mean, as a therapist, like a lot of it is really not fun. A lot of it is just work. I mean, I've had clients hang up on me before because this guy, man, the dude, what did he do? Okay, so he met this girl and the girl had a crush on him and he ended up like going to a bar. So he went with his girlfriend to a bar and the girl was there and the third party was talking to him and his girlfriend saw that and said, "Hey, I know you've been talking to her. I don't like that you this relationship feels inappropriate." And he like kept talking to the other girl. His girlfriend got pissed off. Eventually, like I think she ended up leaving. They had a fight about it. And then he texts the other girl and says, "Oh, sorry, I like you, but my girlfriend got mad, so I had to leave." So, obviously, like no reasonable person would like want to, stay in this relationship or, at least not be, extremely angry by this and question their relationship. So he comes to me and he goes, "How do I get her back?" I said, "Okay, well, you really need to apologize. You need to cut off contact with this other girl. And, when you send an apology to your ex, you really need to, your now ex, you need to really show her that you understand what you did wrong." And so we wrote out the apology letter and he's like, "Oh, I'm not going to send that." And I was like, "Okay, well, then she's not going to get back with you and she shouldn't." Like, I'm not, I mean, it's not easy to, um, it's not easy to sell. It's not easy to sell writing a very vulnerable apology, but it is a lot easier, I think, to sell, um, you know, how to get your ex-girlfriend back even though you try to cheat on her in front of a bar in front of and tried to cheat on her in front of her face at a bar. I think that one's easier to sell than the other. So, that's another challenge in the world of dating coaches. But and I think that's why it's really look. I mean, whether it's a therapist or a coach or anybody, only you know what is right for you, and it's really important to make sure that you educate yourself and have good information first, and then maybe somebody is not always as they don't have to have a PhD from Harvard to be able to guide you. There's knowledge everywhere, but it's really important that you have that everyone has the education for themselves first so they can know what's right for them and use guidance as opposed to completely depending on what somebody else tells them.
Yeah, and trust your gut. But going off of one of your previous guests that you had, I forgot the course that she. I mean, she made me want to take that class. I was like, oh shit, that's like a college. Be more intuitive. That she works with like high profile people, of helping them be more in tune and more listen to themselves. It's just, we all have that gut feeling, that intuition to tell us something. Listen to that, because more often than not, that can help you get out of a bad relationship, because your gut's telling you, hey, this doesn't work, this doesn't feel right, but we just aren't in tune with that anymore. But in any case, um, so with all the experience now that you have in your past, in your life, dating, relationship, therapist, how is that helping you in your dating life?
It helps me a lot because I think that it is, for one, there's, going back to trusting your gut. I have always, in my clients, every single, I'm sure you've seen this too, every single person that you've worked with who's maybe getting out of a bad relationship or, is trying to figure something out, they can always tell you that moment when things started to not feel right. I think that's one thing that is really solidified for me, and that's something that's been really, helps me to stay true to myself. And I think for me in dating, that's one of the most important things you can do. And also to, um, like I was saying, love is just really like not pretty and flowery and exhilarating all the time. Sometimes it's hard and messy. And I think that doing the work that I've done, with Killing Cupid, and then also, in the clinical capacity, I think that that's helped me to shape, like, to kind of have like a more reasonable expectation of things. Um, and to I feel like I'm not as scared off with conflict because I know how to work through it, and then also to know if it's not working. That's really helped me a lot. I don't know if I answered your question.
It's more of a curiosity of it being, especially the difference with American dating and dating in the Balkans is, are you happier dating now in the Balkans? Are you looking to stay? Are you looking to come back to the US? Like, what is your ultimate end goal? Do you see yourself getting married, or do you would prefer to have cohabitation?
I would like to get married one day, yeah, for sure. I definitely do want to. It's not something that I'm like, I was just like kind of in a flow for a while where I was like, I'm dating to get married and I want like a really serious relationship. But I just kind of realized like, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. And so like I have to just, if it feels good, just pursue it and let things happen. I do think that sometimes in America it can be a bit difficult that I mean, I'm from New York, so that's a whole other ball of wax. I think that sometimes there's a tendency to say like, I want all of these things, and it's like we focus so much on these things that we kind of forget to just date. And I think not only in the Balkans, but I think in Europe in general, there's the approach is a bit more laid back. Like, do I like you? Do I want to spend time with you? Okay, well then let's see what happens. Um, and so I think that's kind of more like back to basics, and it feels nice. There's not as much I don't know if I want to say that people are more traditional. I think that, it's also, I mean, New York City, like, it's never Neverland, you can go out and party and do whatever the fuck you want and never grow up, and that's okay. But I think it makes it easy to keep your relationship superficial.
Well, I was thinking you were going to go with the whole hookup culture thing. Is that it's more hookup culture in the U.S. than outside? Because even in Mexico, even it's trending more hookup culture now, but it still has a air of traditional. Like they still want you to meet the parents pretty soon, even though you've been hooking up with it without even knowing each other's names. But eventually they push for that relationship or cementing of a solid relationship. And it was just kind of like weird hearing that from my cousins out down there. I was like, wait, you're doing what? Like I thought I was going to go down there and like take weeks. You can hook up. What? Oh, okay, you don't even have to take her on a date. Good to know. Nadia, I want to thank you for coming on. I'd love to have you back again.
Oh, absolutely. And I would love to come back anytime. Just let me know. And if you want to get in touch with me before then, you can find all of my work and my podcast and everything else that I do at killingcupid.com. And if you want to get in touch with me, you have an episode idea for an episode, a question, comment, or anything like that, you can also reach out to me directly at Nadia at killingcupid.com or follow me on Instagram at killingcupid with 2 underscores at the end.
For my listeners, thanks for sticking around. I love you. You are worthy of it. Till next time, besos.